The text came in while I was at work, in the middle of an afternoon that was otherwise painfully ordinary. I was at my desk halfway through a routine workday. Emails, deadlines, the dull comfort of predictability. My phone buzzed, screen lighting up beside my keyboard. I glanced down, expecting nothing more than a grocery reminder or a half-hearted "what's for dinner" message. Instead, it was from my boyfriend. Nathan's name. I smiled out of habit before I even read it. That smile didn't survive the first sentence. "So," the text began, "I befriended your therapist on Facebook. Wasn't hard. She accepts everyone, apparently." My fingers froze above the keyboard. Before I could process that, another message came through. "We've been chatting. She told me everything about your sessions." My breath caught, a sharp inhale that felt like hitting cold water. Then the rest spilled in, fast and careless, like he was enjoying himself. "Your mom issues. Your trust problems. That thing with your dad. No wonder you're so clingy and paranoid." My vision narrowed. The office around me faded into background noise. All I could hear was my own pulse, loud and uneven. He wasn't done. "She agrees you're probably bipolar or something. Maybe you should get real help." For a second, my brain refused to process the words. I stared at the screen like it had glitched, like if I blinked hard enough, the sentence would rearrange itself into something harmless. It didn't. My chest went tight, not in the hot way anger usually feels, but cold, hollow. My fingers trembled so badly I had to place the phone flat on the desk to stop them from dropping it. Everything I'd ever said in that room, the quiet confessions, the shameful memories, the things I'd never told another living soul, had just been turned into gossip. Weaponized. I reread the messages. Once, twice, 3 times. Real. This was real. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call him and demand an explanation. I set my palms flat on the desk and forced myself to breathe. In, out, slow, measured. Then I typed back 4 words. "Thanks for letting me know." 4 words. Polite, neutral, empty. I watched the message send. A tiny bubble appeared, then disappeared. Silence followed. Then more texts came. "Wait, you're not mad? Why aren't you responding? It's not a big deal. I was just curious. You're overreacting as usual." I didn't answer. Instead, I started taking screenshots. The original message, the timestamps, the follow-ups. His casual admission that my therapist had disclosed confidential information, that he'd manipulated access to her, that she'd discuss me, analyze me, outside of session, outside of consent, outside of legality. I minimized my email, opened a new folder on my desktop, therapist ethical violation, and started documenting everything. You see, when someone shows you who they are this clearly, you don't argue. You take screenshots. Before that text, my life felt steady. Not perfect, not cinematic, just quietly stable in the way you trust without realizing you're doing it. I met Nathan about a year and a half earlier, 18 months to be exact. We weren't one of those lightning bolt couples. No dramatic meet cute, no instant obsession. We were introduced through friends, started talking, realized conversation didn't feel like work, and kept choosing each other one ordinary day at a time. He was charming in an unpolished way. Not flashy, not smooth, the kind of man who remembered how you took your coffee and noticed when you went quiet. At least that's what I thought back then. 6 months in, we moved in together. It felt practical, almost boring, in the best sense. We split groceries, argued about thermostat settings, learned each other's morning rhythms. I told myself that if a relationship could survive mundane reality, it was probably real. 8 months ago, I started therapy. Not because of Nathan, not because of a crisis. Because I was tired of carrying my childhood like an invisible weight strapped to my ribs. Divorced parents, a mother who needed to be the center of every emotional orbit, a father who disappeared when things got uncomfortable, the kind of upbringing that teaches you to self-edit before you speak, to anticipate reactions before you feel your own. The usual trauma package, as people like to joke about, but it wasn't funny living inside it. That's how I found Dr. Heather Brennan. Mid-40s, polished but warm, impressive credentials. Her profile talked about family trauma, attachment wounds, rebuilding trust. Hundreds of positive reviews praising her empathy, her professionalism, her boundaries. Boundaries. That word mattered to me. Our sessions were private, quiet, safe. I cried in ways I hadn't since I was a teenager. I talked about the guilt I carried from my parents' divorce, the way I always felt responsible for other people's emotions, the fear that if I set limits, I'd be abandoned. And slowly, painfully, I started getting better. I learned to name what I felt instead of apologizing for it. I learned that discomfort wasn't danger. I learned that boundaries weren't punishments. Nathan knew I was in therapy. I told him that much. I believed transparency mattered. What I didn't give him was access. I didn't share details. I didn't recount sessions. I didn't let him read my notes or listen in. Therapy was the one place that belonged only to me. At least that's what I thought. A few weeks before everything imploded, Nathan and I had a fight about his ex. Not a dramatic one. A quiet, tired argument that kept circling the same point. He was still texting her daily. She needs support, he said. It's nothing. I told him it made me uncomfortable. He told me I was being controlling. That night, I brought it up in therapy. Not to villainize him, to understand myself, to figure out where my line was, and whether I was allowed to have one. Dr. Brennan helped me articulate a boundary, helped me practice saying it without guilt, without apology. I went home feeling clearer than I had in weeks. Nathan didn't like that version of me. He didn't say it outright, but he felt it. And somewhere in that shift, somewhere between me learning to stand straighter and him feeling less in control, he decided he needed leverage. I just didn't know yet how far he was willing to go to get it. The first signs didn't feel like betrayal. They felt like friction. Small things, easy to dismiss if you weren't paying attention. After that conversation about boundaries, Nathan started watching me differently. Not openly, not aggressively, just more closely. His questions came wrapped in concern, but they landed with weight. How was therapy today? Did you talk about me? Does your therapist think I'm the problem? At first, I laughed it off, told him it wasn't about him, that therapy wasn't a performance review for our relationship. He smiled, nodded, but the questions didn't stop. If I came home quieter than usual, he'd tilt his head and say, "Did she tell you something that upset you?" If I was calm during a disagreement, he'd frown. "You're being weirdly detached. Is this something you're learning in therapy?" Detached. That word stuck with me, because what he called detachment was the absence of panic, the lack of scrambling to reassure him, the refusal to collapse just because he raised his voice or withdrew affection. It wasn't that I cared less. I was just finally breathing, and that unsettled him. He started framing my progress as instability. If I held a boundary, I was cold. If I needed space, I was shutting down. If I questioned his version of events, I was overanalyzing. "You know you do that," he'd say casually. "Your mom messed you up that way." The first time he said it, my stomach dropped. I told him not to talk about my mother like that. He shrugged. "I'm just saying what you've told me." Except I hadn't. Not like that. Then came the jokes. Light on the surface, sharp underneath. "Careful," he'd say if I got emotional. "Don't psychoanalyze me. Is this you talking or your therapist? She must be making a fortune off your issues." Each comment landed like a pinprick. Not enough to bleed, enough to hurt. I noticed other changes too. He started drinking more wine in the evenings. Started picking fights late at night when I was already exhausted. If I disengaged, he'd accuse me of stonewalling. If I stayed, he'd say I was dramatic. Once, after a particularly tense argument, he said something that made my skin go cold. "She agrees with me, you know." "Who?" I asked. He waved it off. "Never mind, I'm just saying, you're not always as rational as you think." I didn't press him. I should have. But I was still operating under an old instinct, the one that believed confusion meant I needed to explain myself better, that if I could just clarify my intentions, things would settle. So I explained. I softened. I reassured. And somewhere in that space, he crossed a line I didn't know existed. 2 weeks before the text, I noticed his phone lighting up with Facebook notifications. He wasn't even active on social media. He'd always said it was toxic. "Since when are you on Facebook?" I asked casually. He didn't look up. "Just networking. You know how it is." It didn't fit the version of him he'd sold me. The guy who never used it. The guy who acted like he was above it. But I let it go. The truth is, nothing felt explosive yet. Nothing screamed danger. What it felt like was someone quietly gathering information, testing reactions, learning where the pressure points were. I didn't know he was talking to anyone behind my back. I didn't know my private words were being discussed over coffee, or typed into messenger bubbles, or analyzed like case notes by people who were never meant to see them. All I knew was that the air between us felt heavier, like a storm building without thunder. And by the time the lightning finally struck, it wasn't sudden. It was overdue. I spent my lunch break documenting, downloaded my invoices showing I was her active patient, took screenshots of her public Facebook profile full of inspirational quotes about trust, safety, and ethical care. I scrolled her friends list. There was Nathan, added 2 weeks ago, My jaw tightened. Then I saw it. Public comments, hearts on his photos, replies under his posts. One exchange made my stomach turn. Nathan, so grateful for new friendships with wise women. Dr. Brennan, likewise, dear. Coffee soon. We'd love to talk more about what we discussed. What we discussed. My private therapy sessions. Saved, screenshot, timestamp. By the time I locked my screen and went back to work, I felt eerily calm, focused, like my emotions had clicked into a place where they could no longer derail me. Nathan texted again. Hello? Why are you being weird? You're doing that cold thing again. I didn't respond. I got home around 6. He was on the couch, wine glass in hand, trying too hard to look relaxed. So, he said, not looking up, we're just not going to talk about this? Talk about what? I asked evenly. You violating my privacy? Or my therapist breaking federal law? Which part should we start with? He rolled his eyes. Don't be dramatic. I was just trying to understand what's wrong with you. I sat down across from him, my hands folded tightly in my lap. What exactly did she tell you? I asked. He smiled. Everything. Everything, he said again, swirling the wine in his glass like this was a dinner conversation and not the public dissection of my inner life. Your daddy issues. How you can't trust people because of your mom. That weird thing where you feel responsible for their divorce, the crying sessions, all of it. Each word landed slowly. He was enjoying this, enjoying the power of knowing things he should never have known. I focused on my breathing, in through my nose, out through my mouth, slow enough that my voice didn't betray what was happening inside my chest. Did she tell you this over Facebook Messenger? I asked, or in person? He paused, suspicious now. Both. Why? Just curious. I kept my eyes on him. Did you save any of the messages? He shrugged. Maybe. Why do you care? I don't, I said calmly. I was just wondering. That's when I saw it, something flicker across his face. Uncertainty. He hadn't expected calm. He'd expected tears, defensiveness, apologies, something messy he could point to and label unstable. Instead, I was quiet. You're being weird, he said, taking another sip. This is exactly what she said about you. My stomach tightened. What did she say? That when you're upset, you don't explode. You get calculated, cold, like you're planning something instead of just expressing emotions like a normal person. That was the moment it clicked. They hadn't just shared my past. They'd been analyzing me, strategizing around me. How long have you two been talking? I asked. Like 2 weeks, he said easily. Since that big fight about my ex, I needed perspective. The fight. The one where I'd asked him to stop texting her every day. The one where he'd called me controlling. The one I'd brought into therapy, where I'd learned how to state a boundary without shrinking. So you befriended my therapist, I said slowly, to get ammunition for our relationship arguments? I befriended her to understand you better, he snapped. Then his tone softened, almost pitying. But honestly, after hearing everything, I don't think this is working. I held his gaze. What do you mean? I mean you need serious help, he said. Medication-level help. She thinks you might have attachment disorders, and I can't deal with that right now. A laughable authority to borrow from someone who couldn't prescribe anything. There it was. Not concern, not care. A verdict. My therapist was giving you relationship advice about me, I said quietly. He shrugged. She was worried about you. I let the silence stretch, long enough for the weight of what he'd done to settle between us. Are you breaking up with me? I asked. He hesitated. I think I need space to process all this. I nodded once. Okay. He blinked. Okay? When do you want to move out? I asked. The color drained from his face. Move out? This is my apartment too. No, I said evenly. The lease is in my name. You're month to month. You can't just kick me out, he snapped. I'm not, I replied. I'm asking when you'd like to leave since you need space. His voice rose. This is exactly what she warned me about. You're manipulative. I stood, my legs steady despite the tremor running through me. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, I said. I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Please have your decision made by then. I grabbed an overnight bag. He was yelling as I walked out, something about emotional abuse, about how I was proving his point, but the door closed behind me before the words could land. In the quiet of the hotel room, I finally let my hands shake. Not because I doubted myself, because I didn't. I opened my laptop, pulled up the complaint form, started typing. Name, license number, dates, evidence. I wasn't emotional. I was precise. And for the first time since that text arrived, I felt something close to relief. The complaint went out first thing Monday morning. 12 pages. Clean. Chronological. Emotionless in tone. Devastating in content. I attached everything. Screenshots of Nathan's texts admitting what he'd done, timestamps showing when Dr. Brennan and I had sessions, and when she started interacting with him online, invoices proving I was her active patient, Facebook screenshots showing their friendship, public comments, and plans to meet in person. I didn't speculate, I didn't accuse beyond what the evidence showed. I let the facts speak. By Tuesday afternoon, the Board of Behavioral Sciences responded. Not a generic auto-reply, a real email, a real name. They took confidentiality violations seriously, it said, especially those involving social media. An investigator would be reaching out within 48 hours. I stared at the screen longer than necessary, my heart beating a little faster, not from fear, but from confirmation. I hadn't imagined this. 2 days later, my phone rang. "Hi," a calm male voice said. "This is Robert from the board. I'm calling regarding your complaint against Dr. Heather Brennan." I stepped into an empty conference room, closed the door behind me. "Yes," I said, "I've been expecting your call." He paused. "I've reviewed your submission. I've been doing this a long time, and I need to tell you, this is significant." That word again. Significant. "She discussed your sessions over Facebook Messenger," he continued, "and met with your boyfriend in person to talk about your treatment?" "That's what he admitted to," I said, "and what the evidence shows." "We'll need a formal statement," he said, "and we may ask you to testify if this proceeds to a hearing." "I will," I said without hesitation. There was a beat of silence on the line. "One more thing," Robert added. "If she did this to you, there's a possibility she's done it to others. We'll be requesting her social media records and communications." My chest tightened. Not with fear, with anger, for people I hadn't met yet. I went in that Thursday, spent 3 hours walking through everything again. Writing, signing, answering questions. When I left the building, the sky felt unusually bright, like the world hadn't realized how dark something had just been exposed. That Friday, Dr. Brennan called me. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was tight, controlled. "I'm very concerned about some allegations that have been made. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Please call me so we can discuss this." I screenshot the voicemail, added it to my file. She called 6 more times that weekend, no more messages. Then the email started. "Your boyfriend reached out to me, not the other way around. As your therapist, I had an obligation to help. These accusations are very serious and deeply troubling." I forwarded every single one to Robert. Monday morning, my phone buzzed with a Facebook message request from someone I didn't know. Her name was Claire. "You don't know me," she wrote. "But Dr. Brennan was my therapist too. She became friends with my mom on Facebook and told her about my sessions. I thought I was crazy. Can we talk?" My hands went cold. We talked that night. Claire told me everything. How Dr. Brennan had minimized her childhood abuse, told her mother she was exaggerating, encouraged her to reconnect with an abusive father. How her mom used that information to ambush her at a family dinner. Claire had filed a complaint months earlier, then withdrawn it. Dr. Brennan had threatened to sue her for defamation. "She said she'd ruin me," Claire whispered. "I was already struggling. I gave up." I gave Claire Roberts' direct number, told her she wasn't alone. By Wednesday, 3 more people had reached out. All women, all former patients, all with the same pattern. Dr. Brennan befriending family members or partners, sharing private session details, coaching outsiders on how to handle the patient. We started a group chat. The stories were horrifying. One woman's husband had been told about her abortion during divorce proceedings. Another's mother was given details of her sexual assault to help her understand. Another's ex-boyfriend was coached on how to trigger her depression. Years of lives quietly dismantled. Then my phone lit up again. Unknown number. "This is Nathan." I stared at the screen, my pulse steady now. "I know you blocked me," the text read, "but I need to tell you something. Dr. Brennan contacted me first. She said she was worried about you, said you were in crisis." I didn't respond. Another message came in. "She told me you were dangerous. Said befriending her was my idea so you wouldn't get suspicious. I think she planned this." That was the moment the ground shifted. I typed back once. "Send me everything." What came next was a flood. Dozens of messages, screenshots, voice notes. Dr. Brennan coaching him, telling him what to say to provoke me, which topics to bring up, which buttons to press. "If she gets upset, document it. Mention her mother. Don't give her space." The last message was dated the day after I filed the complaint. "If anyone asks," Dr. Brennan wrote, "you reached out to me first. This is important. My career depends on it." I forwarded everything to Robert. His reply came minutes later. "Come in tomorrow. Bring all of it." I set my phone down. For the first time since this started, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was watching the consequences roll forward, unstoppable. That night I didn't sleep. Not because my mind was racing, but because it was terrifyingly still. I lay in the dark hotel room, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything backward, every session, every vulnerable sentence I'd spoken into that quiet office, every time I'd believed I was safe because I'd been told I was. Now those words existed outside of me, in screenshots, in group chats, in the hands of people who had never earned them. I kept thinking about the moments I'd cried in therapy, the ones where my voice cracked, where my hands shook, where I admitted things I'd never said out loud, the parts of myself I'd trusted someone else to hold, and how easily those parts had been handed away. By morning, the shock had worn off. What remained was something heavier. Grief. Not for Nathan. That relationship had collapsed under the weight of what it was long before this. Not even for Dr. Brennan. Not yet. I was grieving the version of myself who had believed that doing the right thing made you safe. I went into the board office the next day with a binder under my arm and a knot in my stomach that wouldn't loosen. Robert met me in the lobby. He didn't smile. "That was extensive," he said quietly once we were seated. "What you sent last night?" I nodded. My throat felt tight. I didn't know how much of it there would be until it all came out. He leaned back, rubbing a hand over his face. "This changes the scope of the investigation." "How?" I asked. "This isn't a single breach," he said. "This looks systematic." The word hit me harder than I expected. Systematic. He continued, careful now. Coaching third parties, manipulating patient relationships, fabricating narratives. If this holds, we're looking at a complete collapse of ethical practice. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt sick. Because if it was this bad, if it had been happening for years, then the damage wasn't theoretical. It was real, lived in, scattered across dozens of lives. When I left the building, my hands were numb. That afternoon, Dr. Brennan emailed again. This time, the tone had changed. Less defensive, more desperate. "I never intended harm," she wrote. "I was trying to protect you. Your behavior concerned me. These accusations could ruin my life." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. There it was, the subtle rewrite. She wasn't apologizing for violating my trust. She was reframing herself as the victim of my reaction, as if reporting her wasn't a response to harm, but an attack. I closed my laptop. For the first time since this began, doubt crept in. Not doubt about the facts, doubt about myself. Was I overreacting? Had I misunderstood something fundamental? Was I about to be responsible for destroying someone's career? The questions pressed in late that night, sharp and persistent, old patterns resurfacing, the instinct to minimize, to shoulder responsibility that wasn't mine. I thought about my mother's voice, about being told to let things go, about how often I'd been taught that my discomfort was less important than someone else's stability. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking again, not from fear, but from the effort of holding myself upright. This was the dark moment. The point where doing the right thing stopped feeling righteous and started feeling unbearably lonely. No applause, no certainty, just the weight of knowing there was no way back. If I kept going, there would be hearings, public records, testimony, scrutiny. Her lawyer would dissect my mental health, my childhood, my credibility. I would become evidence. I opened my phone and scrolled through the group chat. Messages from women who sounded exhausted, relieved, terrified. She did this to me too. I thought I was the problem. I almost gave up. I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my thighs, grounding myself in the moment. This wasn't just about me anymore. And that realization, more than anything else, snapped something into place. I wasn't punishing her. I was refusing to protect her at the expense of everyone she'd already hurt. The fear didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling me. I stood, walked to the window, and watched the city lights flicker below. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. Tired, steady, unflinching. Whatever came next, I would face it, because silence would have been easier. And I was done choosing easy. The shift didn't come with relief. It came with momentum. Once the second round of evidence was submitted, Nathan's screenshots, Dr. Brennan's coaching messages, the explicit instructions on how to provoke me. The board moved faster than anyone expected. Robert called me 2 days later. "We've escalated the investigation," he said. "No small talk, no padding. Given the volume of corroborating evidence and the number of complainants, Dr. Brennan's license has been suspended pending a formal hearing." I closed my eyes. Suspended. Not alleged, not under review. Suspended. "She's been notified," he continued, "which means she's legally prohibited from seeing patients or representing herself as a licensed therapist. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders dropping for the first time in weeks. Not in victory, but in gravity. This was real now, public, irreversible. She's not taking it well, Robert added. I didn't respond. That afternoon, the emails exploded. From Dr. Brennan, from her lawyer, from burner accounts I didn't recognize. Accusations, threats, pleas. She framed us, now clearly us, not just me, as coordinated attackers. Claimed we were retaliating because she refused to prescribe medication. A laughable accusation, given she wasn't a psychiatrist and legally couldn't prescribe anything. Her lawyer sent cease and desist letters to all 5 of us. We forwarded them to Robert. Then she made a mistake so catastrophic it erased any remaining ambiguity. She went public. A long Facebook post appeared, rambling, self-pitying, and furious. She didn't name names, but she didn't have to. She wrote about false accusations, mentally unstable patients, and vindictive individuals attempting to destroy a healer's life. She implied diagnoses, suggested histories, enough detail that anyone who knew the situation could connect the dots. Screenshot timestamp sent. Within hours, she launched a website, The Truth About the Lies. On it, she posted what she claimed were session notes, proof that we were delusional, manipulative, unstable. I recognized mine immediately, because they weren't real. My actual session notes had already been subpoenaed by the board. I'd seen them. They talked about childhood trauma, relationship anxiety, boundary formation. The fabricated ones accused me of violent ideation, paranoia, emotional instability so severe it bordered on dangerous. My stomach dropped. This wasn't defense anymore. This was retaliation. The board's response was swift. They expanded the investigation again, pulled insurance billing records, compared session lengths, interviewed former patients. The findings were damning. She'd befriended at least 23 patients or their family members on social media, shared confidential information with at least 11 non-patients, charged insurance for 90-minute sessions that lasted 45, failed to maintain proper records, often writing them days later, if at all. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday. All 5 of us testified via Zoom. She appeared on screen in a conservative suit, hair neatly styled, posture rigid, as if professionalism could be performed back into existence. I went first. I read my statement, presented the timeline, shared the evidence. I didn't embellish, I didn't editorialize. I let her words speak for themselves. By the time I finished, several board members looked visibly shaken. Her defense was simple. They're lying, she said. I was trying to help. These patients are disturbed. Then the others spoke. Claire, Jessica, Amy, Catherine. By the end of Catherine's testimony, one board member looked physically ill. Her lawyer attempted to argue that family involvement was sometimes therapeutic. The board chair, an older woman with a voice like granite, leaned forward. Are you suggesting, she asked calmly, that discussing a patient's sexual assault with her mother via Facebook Messenger is a recognized therapeutic technique? Silence. Then came the final witness. Nathan. He didn't protect her. He didn't soften it. She told me she was dangerous, he said. She told me to document everything, to push her triggers, but she never snapped. She just left. Dr. Brennan interrupted, shouting, accusing. The board muted her. 2 hours later, the decision came down. Permanent license revocation. Referral for criminal prosecution. She could never practice therapy in this state again. And for the first time since this began, I felt something solid settle in my chest. Not triumph. Truth. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They cascaded. Within days of the decision, the board issued formal notices, not just locally, but nationally. Every state licensing board was informed. There would be no quiet relocation, no reinvention under a different zip code. Dr. Brennan didn't go quietly. She tried to contact all of us. Emails, calls, messages sent through acquaintances. She even showed up at Claire's workplace, standing in the lobby like she still belonged in professional spaces. Claire called the police. A restraining order followed. That didn't help Dr. Brennan's case. Her lawyer doubled down briefly, filed motions, sent threatening letters, attempted to frame us as a coordinated smear campaign. But the evidence was overwhelming, the pattern undeniable. Then came the public unraveling. Her Facebook account was suspended. Her website was taken down. Her malpractice insurance dropped her, and then sued her to recover payouts they'd made to settle additional claims that surfaced after the story spread quietly through professional circles. Former patients came forward, more than a dozen. Some I never spoke to, Others reached out just to say thank you, just to say they finally felt sane again. The criminal case moved faster than anyone expected. 11 counts of HIPAA violations, each carrying potential fines and jail time. She pleaded guilty to 5 counts to avoid incarceration, 2 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, $250,000 in fines. Her practice closed, her office building was sold, her house went into foreclosure. By the time the dust settled, she had filed for bankruptcy. Someone sent me her updated LinkedIn profile. She was working as a life coach, legally required to disclose that she'd lost her therapy license for ethics violations. I didn't feel satisfaction reading it, just exhaustion. Nathan disappeared almost entirely from my life. He blocked me everywhere except Venmo, briefly. I assumed he was hoping for money he'd never contributed. I blocked him there too. Weeks later, he sent a long email apology from a new address. He admitted he'd been manipulated, that Dr. Brennan had fed his insecurities, validated his worst instincts, made him feel like a protector instead of a participant. I believed him, and it still didn't change anything. I replied with one sentence. I hope you find peace. That was all. Because forgiveness doesn't require access. What surprised me most wasn't the legal outcome. It was the quiet aftermath. The way my body slowly unclenched. The way my thoughts stopped looping. The way I slept without bracing for the next blow. The board reimbursed part of my legal expenses. Dr. Brennan was ordered to pay the rest. All 5 of us had our fees covered, about $47,000 total. The judge dismissed her defamation lawsuit with prejudice. Truth, he said plainly, is an absolute defense. I started therapy again, carefully, deliberately. My new therapist had one rule I asked about in the first session. What's your social media policy? He didn't hesitate. I don't have any, he said. And even if I did, I would never friend a patient or their family. That would be profoundly unethical. I almost cried. Almost. Instead, I nodded and breathed. The support group we'd formed continued meeting monthly. Virtual, quiet, no pressure, just shared understanding. We didn't relive details. We focused on rebuilding trust, in ourselves first. And slowly, the story stopped feeling like an open wound. It became something else. A line I'd crossed. A boundary I'd held. A moment where I didn't shrink, even when everything in me wanted to. 2 months after everything ended, I realized something quietly profound. I wasn't replaying it anymore. Not the texts, not the hearing, not the moment my private life had been turned into ammunition. The story had stopped looping in my head. That's how I knew I was healing. I still think about the woman I was when I started therapy. The one who believed that if she explained herself well enough, people would understand. That if she stayed calm, stayed reasonable, stayed kind, she could prevent harm. I don't blame her. She was doing the best she could with the tools she had. But I'm different now. Not harder, not colder. Clearer. I learned that professionalism isn't about credentials. It's about boundaries. That authority doesn't make someone safe. That anyone who asks you to surrender your privacy for your own good is asking for power, not trust. I learned that intuition isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition catching up to reality. Most of all, I learned that accountability doesn't require revenge. I didn't destroy anyone's life. I didn't scheme. I didn't retaliate. I documented, I reported, I told the truth. And the consequences followed naturally. Dr. Brennan didn't fall because I pushed. She fell because she couldn't stop crossing lines and assumed no one would ever hold her to them. Nathan didn't lose me because he was manipulated. He lost me because when given access to my vulnerability, he chose to weaponize it. That mattered. I'm still in therapy now, slowly, carefully, with someone who understands that healing requires consent at every step. We talk about boundaries, not as walls, but as doors I get to open or close. Some days, the lesson still surprises me. That strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it looks like a woman sitting quietly at her desk reading an impossible text and choosing not to argue, choosing to screenshot, choosing to walk away, choosing to trust herself. If you're reading this and something feels wrong in your body, in your relationship, in your therapy, in any space where you're told to be vulnerable, listen to that feeling. You're not dramatic. You're not overreacting. You're not imagining it. Document everything. Ask questions. Protect yourself. And remember, silence protects harm far more than truth ever could. Thank you to everyone who shared their stories, offered support, and reminded me I wasn't alone. If this resonated with you, feel free to comment, share, or pass it on to someone who might need it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting back. It's refusing to look away.